Hello, welcome to WeatherWise. I'm meteorologist Nathan Scott. Fall is finally here, and today we're going to focus on all things fall. We'll talk about the reason behind the season, also some fun Arkansas fall facts, and you don't want to miss the end of the show because I'll show you how you can see a galaxy in the nighttime sky. Before we talk about the autumnal equinox, we'll go into what's the difference between meteorological fall and astronomical fall, because I'm sure you've heard those terms over the past several weeks, and it can be confusing because meteorological fall started September 1st. However, astronomical fall started on September 22nd. And basically, meteorological seasons are for meteorologists to break down weather records in a simple manner. When we take a look at, of course, the 12 months, it's just so much easier to divide it by 4 and break up each season into 3 months. So there you see, winter is broken into December, January, February, spring, March, April, May, summer, June, July, August, and fall, September, October, and November. Meanwhile, the astronomical dates are an actual date, and it'll get much more confusing to figure out, well, what was the average temperature for summer, June, July, August, from June 1st all the way through August 31st is much easier to figure out versus starting at June 21st and ending on September 22nd. So once again, meteorological seasons are just primarily for weather records. Now let's talk about the reason behind the season, and this is basic Earth science. You should know this. It's all due to the tilt of the Earth's axis. Do you know what those exact angle is for that tilt? It's 23.5 degrees. So as the Earth revolves around the sun within its orbit, the way the Earth is tilted because of its axis will pretty much affect how the direct rays of the sun are landing on what latitude. So we'll go with the vernal equinox with this situation, but you can also make it the autumnal equinox. But the vernal equinox, first day of spring, the center of the sun, the direct rays of the sun are right over the equator. That means at solar noon, you look right above your head, and if you're at the equator, that sun would be directly above your head. So the equator receives 12 hours of night and 12 hours a day. As we go throughout the year, the direct rays of the sun shift different latitudes. So in this case, we're going from the Tropic of Cancer, which is 23.5 degrees north latitude, to the equator. That's where we are right now. And then the direct rays of the sun will continue to push its way down towards the Tropic of Capricorn, which is 23.5 degrees south latitude. So that's the direction we're going in, and that's why the days are becoming shorter, or the amount of daylight is becoming shorter. And eventually, you see right there, right now, with the equinox, everybody has 12 hours of light and 12 hours of darkness. We're going to rewind here, though, go in the other direction. Summer solstice, that's when the direct rays of the sun are over 23.5 degrees north, or that's known as the Tropic of Cancer. So that's when we have the longest daylight period in the northern hemisphere. It's summer here. Meanwhile, the southern hemisphere is pointing away from the direct rays of the sun, and that's why it's winter in Australia, into parts of Africa, into South America. So the Arctic Circle, which includes Greenland, northern Canada, half of Alaska, Siberia, they get 24 hours of daylight during the summer solstice, and several days before the summer solstice and several days after the summer solstice. And there's the breakdown. Tropic of Cancer, you get 13.5 hours of daylight. Equator, it never changes. They always get 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night at the equator. And you see the Tropic of Capricorn, it's more like 10.5 hours, and Antarctic Circle sees 0 hours of daylight. So this is where we're headed to now, the winter solstice. We're seeing those direct rays of the sunlight go from the equator, migrate their way down towards the Tropic of Capricorn, and that's why our days will become shorter here in the northern hemisphere. And the northernmost city in Alaska, Upkiavik, will be entering complete darkness November 18th, and it will last over 60 days. I don't think I would like that. Just 24 hours of darkness, but people up there are used to it. That certainly would be a unique situation to experience 3 o'clock in the afternoon and it's complete darkness. We say it's 12 hours exactly of daylight and 12 hours of nighttime, but that is not necessarily the case because there's actually something known as the equinox, and then you have the equilux. So the equinox is when the direct rays of the sun are right over the equator. But the equilux is when we have, in that location of that latitude, 100% 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of night. So why are these dates differently? The equinox this year happens September 22nd, but the equilux happens September 26th. And you see right there, the sunrise, 7 o'clock in the morning, the sunset, 7 o'clock in the evening, almost. It's very close. You just have to round it off. We are seeing the difference in these two types of events because the sun's rays get bent or refracted, and therefore the time that we see the sun get above the horizon and below the horizon just varies ever so slightly, but technically it's not exactly 12 hours of daylight and 12 hours of darkness on the date of the equinox. You have to wait for the equilux. Meteorological fall. As you know, we start to cool things down. And here's what happens here in Little Rock. When we take a look at the average highs, the temperatures September 1st, average high was 89. Once we get into the middle of October, our average high is 75. And then getting into the end of November, our average high starts to drop down into the upper 50s. Something you may also notice, and you should notice, is let's say you look at the sun in the same location at the same time of day for the next 2 or 3 months. And you could actually do a drawing of this. I did this in astronomy class where we made a little rough sketch of the horizon, and every day I would go out and look at where the sun's position was on the exact time. Now you have to think about, since we are going from daylight saving time into daylight standard time as we get into November, this of course would change. But basically you see what happens here at noon, which would be 1 o'clock with the daylight saving time aspect. The highest point of the sun is going to be June 20th. The summer solstice. So if you were to, and you can come back to me, Perry, what we do is we take our fist and stretch it out to the horizon. So this is 10 degrees above the horizon. 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90. So 90 is right above you. So 79 degrees, that sun is almost right above you. And then as we get into more of the fall season, the sun gets lower and lower and lower. So we go from 79 degrees above the horizon to right around 55 degrees once we get into the spring equinox or the fall equinox, and then it continues to drop. So the lowest angle happens when it's the winter solstice, and that's when the angle of the sun at noon, the highest point in the sky, would only be 32 degrees above the horizon. So that's 1, 10, 20, 30. So if you looked at the horizon, it wouldn't be very high at all. Another thing to think about is if you notice where the sunrise and sunset happens going throughout the year. So when we have the equinox, the sun rises almost due east and sets almost due west. It actually does that during the equilux. But summertime, the sun rises more towards the east-northeast, and then it sets more of a south-southwest. or west-southwest. So we have a big arcing nature to the sun's path throughout the day. And then as we get into more the fall season, you see the arcing nature gets a little bit lower. So by winter, we're seeing the sunrise more of a south-southeast direction here in the latitude of where Little Rock is located. And then the sunset happens more of a south-southwest direction, and that's why the arcing nature is much lower in the sky. So that is pretty much the science behind the seasons. We're going to delve into some fun facts on fall here in Arkansas, specifically Little Rock, coming up. Just because it's the fall season does not mean we're out of the woods just yet when it comes to hot temperatures. Look what happened last year. We dropped down to 38 degrees October 17th here at Little Rock Airport, but then a few days later, the temperature soared up to 91 degrees October 23rd. So we still have some time to go. The weather pattern is always changing. And of course, as the temperatures go through this roller coaster pattern, that can affect the fall colors. I'm not going to be discussing fall colors in this episode of Weatherwise, but a future episode of Weatherwise in October, I'll cover everything you need to know about how you can witness the fall color here in Arkansas, where the best colors are, and why the colors change in the first place. But let's talk about last year, because last year it was the warmest autumn on record. We had a lot of 90s through September and also into October. And remember, this is for meteorological fall. So this starts September 1st and goes all the way into November, the end of November. So when we average out all the highs and lows, this is what you get. So there's the average high last year, or the average temperature of the month of, or the period of autumn. So 60.6 degrees. That's the average seasonal low temperatures, actually. So it was warm. I mean, we had that one cold night in the 30s, but that is certainly well above where we should be for this time of year. And that's just because it was not only hot, but it was very dry. We had a drought in place last year. On the flip side, you think about frost is knocking on our doorstep. Here's the average first frost dates from 1991 to 2020. Fayetteville usually sees their first frost around October 11th. And then you get into Marshall, the Ozarks, middle of October is usually when it happens. October 23rd in Mena. Around Little Rock, it's about around Halloween time, early November. And that goes all the way down to southeast Arkansas. So temperatures will start to cool down and the nighttime lows will get colder and colder. And remember, you don't need to have a temperature of 32 degrees according to your thermometer. It has to be 32 degrees right at the surface for the frost to form. Let's talk about last 95 degree dates. This is over the past several years, since 2011. Look what happened last year. Our last 95 degree day was September 22nd, 2023. It was October 1st. It ended quite early in 2020, August 29th. And then even earlier than that, in 2017, August 20th was the last 95 degree day. The latest was October 15th back in 2015. How about the last 90 degree day? Well, last year it was October 23rd. The year before that, October 3rd, 2021 was September 20th. 2020 was September 12th. And looks like that was the earliest before 2012. It was September 7th. But the earliest last 90 degree day on record, well, you have to go all the way back to 1879 when it happened August 7th. That is hard to believe, considering that we have plenty of 90 degrees through the month of August and even into September these days. The latest October 23rd back in 2023, or 2003, which also ties, looks like, for last year. So when do we typically have the last 90-degree day on average across some cities here in the state. So Little Rock usually happens September 24th. Pine Bluff takes a little bit longer, October 2nd. And then Mount Ida, it's about September 25th. Arkadelphia, September 28th. More of the same, Conway. Marshall, September 18th. And Mena, also September 18th. So yes, we are going into the fall. But are we done with 90-degree temperatures just yet? I still think we could certainly hit 90 before we get into the end of October. And then after that, we should be done with 90-degree heat until we get into next spring. All right, before we wrap up weather-wise here, we're going to discuss some things happening in the night sky. This is one of the greatest things that you can see if you are a lover of astronomy, because it only happens in the fall season and also into the winter season. And it's just because there's a constellation out there that you should be familiar with. Full moons. You've probably heard full moons get different types of names. And the reason behind that is because of what was happening back in the day when the Indians were around or other cultures were around. They came up with certain names to reflect on what happens during that time of year. So February is known as the snow moon because, of course, there's typically snow on the ground. Then April, you have what's known as the pink moon. That's because the flower phlox would be blooming. By this time of year, in the fall, we're talking about the corn moon in September, and then October is known as the hunter's moon. But we also have something known as the harvest moon. And the harvest moon is when a full moon occurs closest to the autumnal equinox. It wasn't the corn moon this year, so therefore it's going to be the hunter's moon. So the hunter's moon will be known as the harvest moon this year. And usually when the harvest moon comes up above the horizon, just a little bit above the horizon, it will have typically an orangish look to it. And that's just because with the lower angle of the sun hitting the moon, it has to go through a lot more atmosphere that scatters out a lot of light and can create that really nice orange look, almost like a pumpkin, if you want to say. So be on lookout for that as we go into September, the rest of September, and also into October. But like I said, I want to bring this up because we have a really cool constellation. And if you're familiar with the constellation of Pegasus, that's known as the winged horse, there is the Great Square of Pegasus. Very easy to spot. It's not as bright as Orion's belt, but you have to get away from light pollution. But you'll see this square feature, and this is going to be right at sunset going into late September, early October, and then it will get higher and higher into the sky. But right at sunset, and then over the next couple hours after sunset, this constellation will continue to rise. So once you find that constellation, and if you can't, you can always look for Cassiopeia, which looks like a W to the left of the constellation. Very easy to spot, especially if you're out into an area where there's no light pollution. But in between Cassiopeia and Pegasus, the Great Square here, you see this kind of like V-shaped constellation. This is a little bit fainter, but you want to get a pair of binoculars or a telescope especially, because right about here, that is where we have our neighboring galaxy, and it is known as the Andromeda Galaxy. And when you look through binoculars in this area, you will see that galaxy. Now, it won't be looking exactly like this because that's a very enhanced picture, long exposed picture, but the Andromeda Galaxy is our twin. It's our sister. It's a spiral galaxy, just like the Milky Way. And when you look through binoculars, you will see almost like a dot, a star, and a little fuzzy area. A telescope, you're going to see much more detail, and you can actually rent telescopes from a lot of Arkansas libraries. So here's a fun fact here. So the Andromeda Galaxy is 2.5 million light years away. And to put that in perspective, the speed of light is 186,282 miles per second. So you do the calculation, it's a huge number, but it's pretty cool that we can see something that far away and you can actually see it with binoculars. So once again, clear skies, get away from light pollution, get the telescope out, and check out the Andromeda Galaxy. Thanks for joining me here on Weatherwise. Coming up, we've got a great episode. I'm going to be talking to one of the most well-known storm chasers around the United States, talking to him about his whole experience of storm chasing and just getting an idea of how his life has changed with storm chasing. So be on the lookout for that. That's hopefully the next episode coming up here on Weatherwise. If you have any ideas that you want to shoot my way, all you have to do, you can get in touch with me on my Facebook page, or you can email me at nscott@thv11.com. For now, thank you for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.